Okay, so for anybody who lives under a rock or on the very distant shores of Vanuatu, Welcome to Night Vale is a crazy popular podcast by Joseph Fink and Jeffrey Craner. Part comedy, part surrealism, all eargasmic. The hook is that we are listening to local radio from the desert town of Night Vale, hosted by Cecil, voiced in real life by Cecil Baldwin, walking us through local news, bits and pieces from the community, announcements from the city council, stuff like that. But all the goings-on in Night Vale are weird. Like, really weird. Strange lights are seen overhead, herds of mute children graphically dismember citizens, unspeakable Lovecraftian shoggoths skulk in dimly lit corridors, and there is a cat floating 4 feet off the ground in the men's bathroom of the radio station. Night Vale is full of mysteries, terrifying mysteries that arouse the curiosity of us, the listener. For more on how Night Vale confronts us with the unknown, see my good friends over at PBS Idea Channel. Yet throughout all of the horror, and underneath the thick blanket of ignorance which disguises just what the hell is going on in Night Vale, Cecil, and by extension the other citizens, seem to take most of it in their stride. Cecil himself rarely loses his composure, often ending his broadcasts on a whimsical or a thoughtful note, not really showing any sign that all the terrifying weirdness gets to him. Except for that time he went to Desert Bluffs. Ugh, Desert Bluffs. And when Carlos almost died. Dear, sweet Carlos. And this is where some philosophy comes in, specifically the philosophy of one Albert Camus and the system he developed called Absurdism. Camus wrote a famous essay called The Myth of Sisyphus, in which he outlines his position. He says there is a fundamental contradiction between our desire to find meaning in the universe and the universe itself, which is meaningless. This incompatibility, this contradiction, he called the absurd. Life has no purpose. The universe is just one of those things that happens every now and then, and the Earth is just a tiny, tiny part of it. No matter what we do, stars will wheel and turn, planets will continue in their stately orbit. Ultimately, the Earth will be destroyed, and your life will pass away as if it had never happened at all. There is no meaning of life. Faced with that 3 a.m., brain-shrinkingly chilling starting point, Camus opens his essay with this quote: "There is but one truly serious philosophical problem, and that is suicide." Faced with the meaninglessness of it all, why not just kill yourself? It comes to the same thing in the end.
Boy, this party really died.
Now, Camus finished his essay in France in 1941. I'm not sure how well you know your European history, but you may be aware that at that time, a new political movement was gaining a lot of ground in Europe. You might have heard of it. It was called National Socialism. Understandably, a lot of philosophers in Europe were beginning to find the old romantic notions of overarching morality and meaning a little bit too naive for the historical period they were living in. Like the citizens of Night Vale, Camus was living a nightmarish existence. There really were vague yet menacing government agencies. There really was a secret police, and people really did disappear. Only there wasn't any paranormal activity behind it, which arguably makes it worse. You can kind of see why he was such a downer. What made Camus different from the existentialists who came before him, and whose work is often lumped in with his, is that the existentialists said that people should give life its own meaning. It might be meaningless in itself, but that doesn't mean you can't invest your life with some purpose. There isn't one big meaning of life, everyone's kind of free to choose their own. But Camus said you can't do that. That's being in denial. That's refusing to face the music about your life ultimately having no meaning. The only way to get by it is to accept the absurd, to live with it. Just to be clear, when Camus said we need to embrace the absurd, he wasn't saying that we need to embrace the Nazis. The Nazis don't represent the absurd in his system, they're just part of the background context of it. He wasn't a Nazi sympathiser. He was saying that by embracing the absurd, that's an act of revolution against the absence of meaning in life. He was saying that just because your life is pointless, that shouldn't stop you from living it anyway, in light of that fact. Which brings us back to Night Vale. There is contradiction in Night Vale too between the unknown and our desire to know it. There's also contradiction between the really, really weird and the really mundane, which is of course one of the things that makes it really funny. If you lived in Night Vale, you'd be terrified. Evil doppelgangers, glow clouds that rain dead animals, ominous hooded figures. You'd run, you'd get out of there. And yet, Cecil accepts it. The terrifying unknown is normal for him. He accepts the craziness of it all, neither denying it nor letting it get to him too much. Camus called his essay The Myth of Sisyphus because in Greek mythology, Sisyphus was condemned by Zeus to roll a boulder up a hill every day and then watch it roll all the way back down, only to have to do it again, forever. Camus saw this as a pretty good analogy for the human experience. Ultimately, it's tiring and futile, but it would only be depressing if Sisyphus kept trying to find the meaning, kept trying to succeed in his impossible task. Once he realised that there was a contradiction between his desire and the actual nature of the universe, once he realised it was an impossible, absurd situation and accepted that, then he could live with it. And living with it is the beginning of being happy with it. I think Welcome to Night Vale can be seen as a modern embodiment of Camus' absurdism. Terrifying, unknowable things happen, but Cecil doesn't let it bother him. He just goes, yeah, that's life. What do you guys think? Does Welcome to Night Vale embody absurdism or some other philosophical system? Let me know your questions, comments, queries and comebacks underneath the video on Facebook, Twitter or by email. Make sure you mark your Night Vale spoilers for those of us who are not completely caught up yet. Don't neglect subscribing for more philosophical videos. And in the meantime, good night, listeners.